Hey everybody, welcome back to Audio Basics. I'm so happy you guys liked the last episode, which was, explained how a compressor works. And I was going to go into the different types of compressors, but I thought this one would be maybe even a little more helpful to all of you guys. And this is explaining what sidechaining does. This is based off a question I got from Chris Kurtz. Let me read this off for you.
I'm really glad you made this video. I meet so many aspiring engineers who really have no clue what a compressor is or what it does. You should also make a video on side compression just to exemplify further how a compressor is functioning.
Sidechain compression definitely mystifies a lot of us, and it's a great tool. I use sidechain expansion all the time, and I'm going to show you guys what that's all about a little bit further on the video. But sidechain compression is actually pretty simple once you get the grasp of it. If you guys haven't watched my how to use a compressor video, please watch that first, because that lays out the basics of what the controls do. And believe me, it's a lot less confusing than the controls make it out to be. So sidechain compression, basically, if you guys remember how compression works, once the signal gets past a certain threshold, the compressor turns things down. It's a very fast volume knob, and the ratio controls how hard it's, how far down it gets turned, and the attack and release controls control how fast it's turned down and then turned back up again. All sidechain compression does is it changes the source that the threshold works from. That is it. In this case, we're using other tracks for a source for that threshold. So instead of, the signal compressing itself, say like on a bass guitar, when the signal gets past a certain part on the threshold, it compresses. It's using a different track to control that threshold. So perfect example here, we're going to set something up here in Reaper, and we're going to use a classic combination for sidechaining, and that's kick and bass. So right now I've got my bass guitar, and you hear a little tick, 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 tick there. The kick's getting moved over here. So what we have to do is send the signal from the kick track to the bass guitar. So we're going to send that on an auxiliary, which is 3 and 4 here. And I'm going to pull up my recomp. And for sidechaining, I use recomp all the time because it's just very simple. I don't think the Slate plugins actually support sidechaining, so that kind of sucks. However, so what we've got here is just set up a real fast compressor with a fairly medium release time, and it's a 5-to-1 ratio because we want to, well, let's set it down to a 6-to-1 because we want to stomp on this pretty hard and explain what's going on. So the trick here is most compressors default to your main input left, right. All we're doing is we're setting an auxiliary input, which we had set from the send. So this is going to 3-4, which is the auxiliary, and the auxiliary input 3-4. So the kick is being sent to the bass guitar track, and because we've got the preview filter up, this is explaining what the filter is coming from. You can hear the kick drum. So we're setting up to compress that kick drum. If we turn the preview filter off, watch this. So the signal is being turned down, you guessed it, every time that kick hits. So the purpose here is to carve space out in a mix. If your bass guitar and your kick drum are competing for the same frequencies, you can make space by turning one element down for the other. Of course, I'm sure this would work in reverse as well, but generally you want the kick to kind of step on the bass guitar, not the other way around, because let's face it, most bass players just aren't worth listening to. This being the rare exception, Keith Wilkinson is amazing. Now you got to be sure to use this sparingly. Otherwise, you can just completely destroy a bass guitar track. You see all the compression going on here. That's like, 14, 15 dBs of compression. We're never going to hear the bass guitar in the mix. If we turn that sidechain off, so the trick is to use it gingerly. Okay, so we're going to pull that threshold back a little bit and just kind of set that up a bit. Yeah, that's pretty cool right there. We're going to pull that in right about here. About 5 dBs of compression. We don't need a lot. All that, like I said, all that's doing is just carving out a little bit of space for that kick drum. I still want to be able to hear the bass because that's a pretty ripping bass tone. So another example of sidechaining would be snare and overheads. Let's take a listen here, and I think I already had that going on. As you can see, yes, I've got a send sent to the overhead tracks. Let's pull up the overhead compressor here. I got the recomp going on, and this is actually hitting before anything else because I usually hit my overheads pretty hard with a bunch of other controls. Right. We put the preview filter on. So we've got the overhead soloed up, and we're listening to the snare track. Again, it's set up the exact same way. All we're doing is compressing down on the overhead track every time that snare comes down. And with it turned off, we're just kind of killing that transient of the snare in the overheads. Now you can change the release time on that and get just a little bit more crunch going on. Let's take the threshold down and hit that really hard. Now it's kind of pumping. That might not be what we want. We'll just kill that transient. Get a little more sustain. And what that does there is it carves out a space for that snare transient for the close mic as opposed to the overhead. I tend to like quite a bit of snare in my overheads. That's just me. But a lot of guys like to just have the close mic. I don't know. They're weird. Now, last example here would be an expander. And I use this all the time on room mics. Actually, I'm going to turn off that compressor because that's still set pretty extreme. Now, I use drum leveler quite a bit here. And let me pull this up. I've got a send going to the room mics again on auxiliary 3.4. And let's see, I've got the sidechain input on my drum leveler on the room mic. So let's watch what's happening. So you can hear the detectors being set to the snare again. So what I'm using this for is a sidechain. It's almost a gate. It says a gate, but it's more like an expander. And what this does, if I turn this off, you can listen. What this is doing is it's popping up the room mics just on the snare hits. I use drum leveler all the time on kick drums and my drum bus and room mics, and this is just spectacular. So it's just popping up that snare on the room mics just for the snare hit. Just so I can add a little more. Let me pull up my drum bus here. And overheads. Just so I can have a little bit more air on that snare on the hits. Without all that cymbal wash. And I can control that completely here. So that's set to an extreme example, but the idea being is if you use it sparingly, it can be super effective for getting just a great room sound without an overbearing of cymbal wash. So there you go. There's two examples of sidechain compression and one example of sidechain expansion. All right, I hope you guys found this lesson useful. And if you like the song, you can grab the multi-tracks and a 3-hour video lesson detailing everything on how I put this song together. It's called Producing Prog Metal, and you can find it in the description below. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys next week with another episode of Audio Basics. Take care.